which are fascinating. So what I'm doing is just a very quick feature at the beginning of each talk. I dive into what was being discussed at the Institute Minutes in that month. So I did December last year. Funny enough, I'm doing January this year. This month, oh God, what year are we in? I'm just no good when we get to a new year. So there's a lot of very sensible stuff in the January minutes. In December last year, it was all about wish drives and lots of fun stuff. A lot of it was quite serious. So I've pulled some of that out, but there are a couple of bits of juicy gossip, okay, going back, so I will cover that too. Okay, so the book actually, it starts in 1926, it's just shy of 100 years old, which is absolutely brilliant. So the first January entry was January 1928, and they obviously just walked in and said, let's just get everything boxed off, because they moved and seconded just to mark all of the previous year's minutes as read. So I'll have to bother with that. But also to mark off previous year's band sheet as complete and marked. So I was like, okay, work smarter, not harder. Let's just tick it all off. Love it. And they approved an opera to take place at the school on Saturday, February the 4th, which I thought was rather fantastic. No further details, so I don't know which one it was. Then we moved to January 1930. There was a hot pot supper approved to be held at the Institute on January 22nd for the young men's class, the first class boys and their teachers of the school. Also moved that a discussion would be held at some future point regarding the heating of the meeting room used by the committee members. I just love it. It's like, we can't just box that off now, but we will approve, we will have a meeting at some point to discuss the situation of heating or lack of. No further updates yet, but I'll let you know when we get that resolved. January 1931, it was moved and approved that a suggestion box be placed in the Institute for the betterment of the Institute. The next item was the selection of officers, which caused some very heated discussion, which was not good for the welfare of the Institute. No further details given. I don't know why the discussion was so heated, but again, maybe in future months. It's like watching something like we used to on TV, isn't it? We have to wait each week. So we'll see what monthly updates we get. January 1934, it was approved that Mr. H. Andrew be allowed to purchase all sundries for the Institute without consulting the committee. Later, and this is true, the word necessary was inserted above the word sundries. So it made me smile imagining what Mr. Andrew had been buying, what outlandish purchases had been made before they reviewed his purchase power and said, no, it's just necessary things, Mr. Andrew, so you can take the elephant back. Thank you, we don't need that. January 1948, so this one was quite intriguing because it mentioned date of unveiling photograph of Flight Lieutenant Andrew be left to the committee. Now, so I've done talks on the men who died in World War I, World War II, so I've checked, but he's not there, he's not anywhere mentioned in my talk, so I don't know who he is or why they're unveiling a photograph, but again, I will find out. January 1957, it was approved that a potato pie supper be held on March the 12th, and Mr. T. Clough agreed to arrange a jumble sale to be held at the school. And we have two lots of gossip from this month, so I'm quoting verbatim here. It was mentioned that certain members of the second team were not acting as members during the match, and it was agreed that the captain of the team point out that the offenders were expected to undertake this duty. And I love that certain members, very passive aggressive there, I'm not going to mention their names, but certain members, and they were taken to task. And also, the matter was raised of a certain Mr. Andrews who had not been paying his subs. He hadn't done so for a lengthy period of time, and it was agreed unanimously his name be erased from the list of members. Oh dear. I love it. People say the past is boring. Not at Bardley Institute, it wasn't. January 1960, another potato pie supper. Last month it was all about wish drives. This month it's all about potato pie suppers. Another jumble sale approved to be held at the school. January 1961, another potato pie supper with a social evening approved to be held. And I wish we still had community potato pie suppers. I think that sounds brilliant. And it was also approved that from now on, all table tennis players should provide their own balls. No further payments for said balls would be approved to come out of institute funds. So clearly much carelessness around safekeeping of balls in the institute said no, buy your own from now on, thank you very much. And then the last one was 1964, another potato pie supper was approved. And the deplorable condition of the writing table in the institute was mentioned, and it was approved that Mr. Teaclough would endeavour to find one in better condition. So there we go. Absolutely love it. Kids nowadays wouldn't know what to do with the writing table, would they? Or where do I put my laptop in? Where does the iPad go? Right, so that's January's minutes. We shall crack on now with Welcome to Park Bridge. So yes, this is the second outing. I gave this talk for the first time in April last year, but I was asked to do it again, and I'm more than happy to do so. One of my absolute favourite places. And I do, again, if you're a frequent, you come to my talks, I do mention the surname Lees a lot. They haunt me, the Lees family of Barnsley. They work their way into every talk I do, and this is where they really come to life. Okay, I'm going to mention the surname Lees approximately 11 million times. Okay, there's lots of them. In fact, there's so many. We've got Samuel Lees 1, 2, 3, 4. This one only goes up to 4, but you know there'll be others. So we'll have a quick look through the agenda. So a background to the site, what an Ironworks is, Iron, what it's all about, then a history of Parkbridge Ironworks, the Lees family, what the site looked like, Parkbridge Village, reminiscences of Parkbridge. That's a lovely website that I've got some details from, and I do recommend it if you wanted to find out, you know, memories of people who worked there, memories of people who lived in the village, where Parkbridge exported to. I always like to look at other local things that may be relevant. So there were some other local ironworks, and then future development of Parkbridge, and I have an update on that from my last talk. I sent a very official email to the council and got a fairly snotty one back, but an update it is. Okay, so without further ado, so I don't know a huge amount about Parkbridge itself before it was Parkbridge Ironworks. Okay, the name Park Bridge first appears in the 17th century, and it may have been a deer park, part of the ancient manor of Ashton. I mean, anyone who's there will have seen deer in the area, but this is a map snapshot just showing the extent of Park Bridge. You know, it's...
Yeah, well, what's called Woodbark Colliery.
Yes.
It was called Woodbark Colliery because this area was a deer park originally.
Oh, there we go, see? But Roy says it, that is fact. That is absolute fact. It makes sense, yeah? So there's a nice link between Parkbridge and one of the coal mines I've mentioned in previous talks. So Fairbottom Colliery, which was just down where Fairbottom Bob, that's the word I'm struggling on tonight, Bob's, where Fairbottom Bob's is, or was, okay. So when the coal mine opened in the 18th century, that combination of water and coal attracted other industries to the area. And there was a water-powered corn mill on the site where Parkbridge was built. That was mentioned in 1422, situated on the River Medlock, and I found other references. So I found references that referred to a 1756 map of the Ashton estate. And I've tried. I cannot find a copy of this map. I think that'll be fascinating for many reasons, but it's on my very lengthy list of historical things to do at some point in my lifetime. I will find it. So the mill was at the location of Sheepwasher's Brook, which, as I understand, is kind of more or less underneath Parkbridge as it stands now. And the land was leased by Samuel Lees II and his wife Hannah in the 1780s, and the watermill was converted into a finery forge, which is a forge used to produce wrought iron from pig iron by decarbonisation in a process called fining. I'm not an ironworks expert, so I'll do my best to give you some information. I don't really understand an awful lot of it. Pig iron is crude iron, which is a very high carbon content, very brittle, has limited use, but when it's converted into wrought iron, that has a very low carbon content, becomes very strong and tough, and can be converted into steel, which has many industrial uses. But this talk is not going to be a scientific study. Don't be looking at your watches thinking, is that what you're going to be talking about? Because it's really not. But I just like to give sort of relevant information. So, starting with the basics, what was an ironworks? Well, it's essentially an industrial plant where iron is smelted, where iron and steel products are made. So iron was first worked in England about 2,700 years ago, rather cleverly, which is called the Iron Age. Eh? Us historians, we don't just throw this stuff together. So iron is strong, hard and tough, makes it ideal for many different uses. It's used for tools, for weapons, nails. It was used obviously for horseshoes, and it doesn't soften, it doesn't melt unless it gets incredibly hot. You need a temperature of 1,371 degrees centigrade to actually melt it. So obviously ironworking required very high temperatures and huge amounts of fuel, and charcoal was used exclusively as a fuel until the 1700s. And the earliest smelting method, known as bloomery smelting, was used from around the 8th century BC, and that continued into the post-medieval period, but then started to be replaced by blast furnace smelting from about the 15th century. And smithing, forging, was the process of shaping the iron into finished goods, or making it into appropriate shape to be sold. And the local smithy in Bardsley used to be where the Premier shop is now, on that corner at the bottom of Kirk Lane. That's where the smithy was. So then, what it's used for, why it's important, it's actually considered to be the most important of all metals, iron. 90% of all metal refined today is iron. Predominantly used to manufacture steel, which is used in civil engineering and manufacturing. Now, in the 19th century, demand for wrought iron was very high, and like I said, it was used for many things: nails, tools, horseshoes, firearms, engines, rails, very importantly for rails. 1825 is actually sometimes referred to as the New Iron Age, because this is when the iron industry experienced a massive demand for all the new railways, or the new railway lines that were being laid. But also for the bridges, for the tunnels, just about every aspect of the railways needed iron. And Britain became renowned worldwide for its production of railway iron, and even after the mid-19th century, when railway building, like the boom, started to slow down, Britain was one of the key players in exporting iron abroad. And it was also a very popular choice for cookware, relatively expensive, easy to clean, and of course, because it can withstand such high temperatures, great for daily use in the kitchen. Very popular in the 19th century for window frames, lamp posts, and vases such as this beauty. There we go, nice little 19th century ostentation there, but in the very fashionable wrought iron. And demand for iron and its production grew rapidly through the Industrial Revolution. So in 1700, British iron production was 12,000 metric tonnes a year. By 1850, this had risen to over 2 million metric tonnes each year. Like I said, British iron, very highly sought after, and just produced so much and accounted for about 40% of steel produced worldwide. And I don't know how much Park Bridge obviously contributed to that, but they definitely made a reasonable contribution, and I will be following that up later on in this talk. So then, how and when did the Park Bridge Ironworks start? So Samuel Lees II, we don't cover Samuel Lees I, he can be for another talk, okay? He leased the land that he'd built the ironworks on from the Earl of Stamford on the 3rd of May, 1786. He was described in 1787 as being a watchmaker, but he clearly had plans to expand because he'd already leased the land, and by 1789 he had started his ironworks business. He mortgaged other land that he owned to the tune of £200, and he used this to start the first phase of buildings on the land. By the 9th of September 1789, the first buildings had been erected, and when he died, he was described as a whitesmith. Do you know what a whitesmith is? Yeah. No. It's a smith who specialises in finely furnished wrought ironwork. There we go. So Samuel Lees II married Hannah Buckley on Christmas Day, I like that, 1783, and then 12 children. Quickly, because he died quite young, so I mean, what that's
It wasn't there, is it, really?
And so the Lees were described that time as being an ancient local family, which is probably why they haunt every talk that I do. But they were predominantly farmers and mainly living around the Alt Hill area. One thing I always do in my talks, I always point randomly, so I was about to go Alt Hill, but then I'm thinking, it's that way. Oh, it's that way. I do it all the time. I'm pointing to my house and just, I have no idea, no sense of direction. And it clearly was a name that came to dominate the local area. So Hannah has a reputation of being a remarkably successful businesswoman. Women weren't commonly running businesses back then. So she was 40 when Samuel II died in 1804. Now sadly they only had 6 children who survived childhood, but so she had the 6 children and she had an ironworks to manage. So her eldest son Edward was 15 at this time. She looked after her family, she looked after Park Bridge. She didn't just look after Park Bridge, she ensured it grew, that it flourished. Under her guidance, it really expanded. So again, in my coal mines talk, I talked about the Copperas coal mine, later Wood Park. What's it, Coal Pit Lane? Am I pointing in the right direction? Oh my goodness! Coal Pit Lane. Okay, I'm going to try to stop pointing. And the owners were Messrs. Lees and Booth, and the Mr. Lees in this case was Edward. While he was a miner, Hannah, his mum, had purchased the land, but they didn't work the Copperas works themselves. The Copperas work manufactured like an industrial product that was used in the textile industry, so it wasn't really anything they had any use for, but they rented out the land and the works for an annual rent of £550. And in 1810, Hannah borrowed £500 to build a new weir and a water-powered building on the Park Bridge site, and this was on the site of the roller shop, and I'll go through the site shortly. So Hannah died in 1831, and Park Bridge was inherited by Samuel Lees III, her third surviving son. Her 2 other sons, Edward and Henry, they had their own interests in Macclesfield and Ashton. So Henry had a firm, H. Lees and Sons. They owned an ironworks in Ashton, later named Bridgend Works. This is a poster of theirs dating to 1891. So it's his, Ashton underlined, but yeah, I'm still going to reference the one that everyone knows, aren't we? Yeah, I'm kind of connected to Park Bridge. So Samuel III ran Park Bridge Ironworks until he retired in 1863. He died in 1873. After he retired, his son, Samuel IV, took over the running of the works until he retired in 1886. And his 2 sons, no further Samuels, we had Gilbert and Morris, and this is a photo of Morris Lees. They took over the day-to-day running when Samuel IV retired. And it was Samuel Lees IV who built the Park Bridge village for the workers. The cottages, the institute, St James's Church, the school. He was also the one that closed down the local pub for the good of his workers, and I'll come back to that shortly. So Park Bridge Ironworks remained in the hands of the Lees family until it closed in 1963. So when Samuel Lees IV died in 1907, he died in 1907, and Morris died in 1955, his son, and then the running of Park Bridge passed into the hands of his son, called Lowther, who ran the business till it closed in 1963. So it was absolutely a family-run business from start to end. There was always a Lees, in charge of Park Bridge, and I think that's lovely, for it to have been all that time a family-run business. So, what did the site look like? It was huge, and it had lots of different parts to it, and lots of different bits that were changed, added to, altered over the many years that it was in existence. It was the best part of 200 years. So I'll give you an overview of each individual section. So some are shown on this photo. This is a brilliant photo, but there are other bits that aren't sort of noted on here. So we've got the roller shop just there. So this is actually where the car park is now. So when you park up, you're in the old roller shop. This is where the iron and steel bars were machined into fluted or grooved rollers for textile machinery. And then you've got the stables. So that's where the visitor centre is now. So this part of the site was purchased in 1860. The stable building was completed in 1870 and it housed the working horses of the Ironworks, could accommodate 18 horses. There were 2 additional stalls which were used as sick bays or for accommodating the posh carriage horses of the Lees family. So that's where they lived. Then you have Dean Terrace. So these cottages were built between 1850 and 1860 for the ironworkers and their families, and number 9 was the site of the local co-op. Dingle Terrace, Love Dingle Terrace. And I'm really disappointed because when we first moved here, the phone box at the end of Dingle Terrace was one of those like book libraries, and I left books, I'd take them, and then it just kind of, you know, it stopped during COVID or something, but whenever I'm up there, I'm like, yeah, it was lovely. So Dingle Terrace, built by Samuel Lees IV in 1865 for the ironworkers and their families, and they were allocated according to status. So the foreman and the schoolmaster, they lived in the biggest houses, the ones at the ends. Okay. Oh shoot. There we go. That was shoot. Honest. Dean House. So this was built in 1844 for the Lees family. The situation was specifically chosen to give them a commanding view of the work. So they could wake up each morning and go, we own that. That's ours. Thank you. We'll have that. Thank you. So the family later sold the house, moved to Western Hill, and it's now in private ownership. It was last sold, from what I can find out, in 2018. We've got this lovely photo that dates to sometime in the 19th century. But obviously they've got, I really want to peer over, but the gates are very high, probably to stop people doing just that. So then you've got the top forge. I've lost it. Where's the top forge? Oh right, no, it wouldn't have been on that photo.
It's not on that photo.
Yeah, so it was up past Dean House, and this is where the first processes of the ironworks took place. So wrought iron was made there from cast iron and scrap, was worked there. The top forge opened in 1870, and it was worked there until the end of the Second World War. I think I've got a photo somewhere later that I've referenced, and I've mixed up the slides. So anyway, we'll come back to that. But the bottom forge, which is definitely there, this is where iron from the top forge was brought and reheated in furnaces and rolled into different shaped bars. So the first forge was built there in 1810 and was replaced in 1850. And the building got so hot there was no glass in the windows, just bars, because obviously the workers needed all the fresh air they could get coming in. And then you've got the bright shop. This was built in 1907, so this is where bars from the bottom forge, they were black, they were very dirty, so they were cleaned here and then either sold to other manufacturers or sent to the roller shop for finishing. There was a gasworks which was located up near the top forge, and that provided the gas lighting for the village and the works. In 1916, Park Bridge was supplied with gas from Ashton, so the building then became a joiner's shop. And then station house here, where the station master lived, which obviously very close to the railway line and station. And yeah, I thought I had some photos. Here we go. This is a map of the station line. So you've got Park Bridge Station showing the viaduct, but yeah, so obviously all defunct. None of that currently in existence. So he's got some photos of some of the buildings from the forge, from Park Bridge. That was so good I put it in twice. So the viaduct, just one of my all-time favourite parts of Park Bridge. And when I'm there, I do love to stand, because they've got one of those, you know, like the history boards and whatever, just down near the road, and it's just like, you know, if you look up here, you'd have been directly underneath it. And, you know, I just think it's absolutely fantastic, absolutely gorgeous. And the foundations for that were laid on the 10th of October 1859, and then the station and the Park Bridge section of the railway line were opened in August 1861. By 1890s, there were 23 services a day, Monday to Friday, 24 on Saturdays, 11 on Sundays. The viaduct was 200 metres long, just over 24 metres high, and had 9 arches. Like I said, I don't know when this photo dates to, but I just think it's absolutely fantastic. I would have loved to have lived here then and seen it. I really would. And such a rich part of our area's history. Goods services stopped at Park Bridge Station by 1925, and passenger services were withdrawn in 1959. The line and station were closed for good in 1967, and the viaduct was demolished in 1971. I know, it's sad.
Yeah, we used to walk along Parapet Walk.
I bet you did. If there was local mischief to be getting into, you'd be there leading it, wouldn't you? Absolutely. Absolutely. So up past Dean House, there's an old building that dates back to the 1600s called Kevelow Farm. So this was a pub called the Yew Tree Inn, but Samuel Lees IV, he bought it in the late 1850s and he closed it. He wanted to keep his workers sober. They had to wait till 1905 for the Park Bridge Institute, which is still there, to be built by... So Morris Lees, his son, said, forget that, I'm in charge now, you're having a pub, okay? So the Institute was built. So as well as being able to buy alcohol, there was a billiard table, a reading room, and like I said, it's still open today. I think it's Fridays and Sundays. But if you live locally, you can absolutely go and use the facilities, and we will definitely get there. We keep meaning to go.
We've never been.
Never been. So throughout the 20th century, the work started to go into decline. The cotton mill on the site closed in 1931, and in 1944, the top forge closed. The railway line, as I've said, closed in 1959. The Bright shop followed in 1960. The bottom forge closed in December 1961, and 1963 the Ironworks closed for good. But it is believed that Park Bridge was the longest running ironworks in the whole of Lancashire, which I think is an absolutely grand achievement for this really family run firm. So I'll talk a little bit about Park Bridge Village then, which was built by Samuel Lees IV for the benefit of the workers of the ironworks. So in 1840, Mill Terrace was built, which consisted of 5 terraced houses. Dean Terrace Road was built in 1847, that had 16 cottages and 2 rows. 1865 we had Dingle Terrace, 25 houses and 2 rows, and this was when St James's Church was built and the schoolhouse were built. So this slide shows the site of the church and school. So built 1865, demolished in 1985. But I think it's lovely that it's, you know, there's that to commemorate it. So Dingle Terrace still stands. Mill Terrace was demolished in the 1980s. The area is now grass. The church, as I said, demolished, and it's, you know, it's obviously modern housing that occupies that site now. So I'd like to give you a bit of context to the Lees family building this village for their workers, and kind of like when they did it and why they did it. In the 19th century, there were quite a few villages known as model villages that were built in a similar manner to that at Park Bridge. I mean, a lot of them on a much bigger scale, but you know, this was a smaller scale operation. And these villages provided new modern housing, good sanitation, and often complete with a school, with a church, recreational facilities. Some even had a pub, you know, didn't have to wait till the 20th century. And the housing at these model villages was just often so much improved from the cramped, you know, often squalid conditions that people did live. You know, if you're working in a factory, you're not got a huge amount of money, and an awful lot of housing at the time. It didn't have the sanitation, it didn't have, you know, modern facilities. But at Park Bridge, every house, irrespective of size, had 4 rooms, minimum 4 rooms. But the bigger properties, like Dingle Terrace, where the schoolmaster lived, where the forge manager lived, they had 6 rooms, and you know, bigger overall, reflecting their status. Some of the other model villages built around this time include the one built by Cadbury Brothers in the area they called Bourneville. That was built at the end of the 19th century and became a blueprint for lots of other model villages. So you had houses, but the Cadburys also built sports fields, bowling greens, fishing lakes, a lido, and a pavilion used to host balls and dinners. The Lever brothers built Port Sunlight Model Village between 1899 and 1914 for their soap factory workers. A lovely place to live by the sounds of it. Allotments, a cottage hospital, a school, a swimming pool, a church, an art gallery, and a concert hall.
I went not that long ago, and it's still absolutely beautiful.
Was that Port Sunlight?
Yes.
Yes.
It's,
Well worth the visit.
it's
Yeah.
lovely. It's beautiful. It really is.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I've not had the chance to go.
The houses, the stunning.
That's brilliant. Oh, that's something. So, you know, when I'm talking about this, you've been there, and these were built for like factory workers. You know, these were built by philanthropist owners who believed that their owners that their workers deserved this. You know, they understood that if their workers are going home to a decent home, you know, they're secure, they're warm. Well, they're going to be more productive workers, but they didn't have to do it. A lot of owners at this time wanted productive workers, irrespective, you know, of standards at home. And then you've got the mother of all model villages, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is Saltaire in West Yorkshire. Have you been there?
Yeah,
You've been there,
quite a lot because there's the Hockney place at Saltaire as well.
right?
So there's the old mill now displays a lot of Hockney's, David Hockney's work.
Oh
And
wow!
it's got the most amazing KitchenAlia shop.
Oh, right, you had me at shop.
Stunning houses, beautiful parks.
Yeah, no, if I go anywhere like that, if there's not somewhere where he can get a coffee and I can go and spend next month's mortgage payment on tax in a
There's
shop,
somewhere you could.
then I mean, we're going, basically, we're going. I'm not going to buy Hockney, don't worry. So yes, so Saltaire, so it's a town really, isn't it, rather than a village. So built by Titus Salt between 1851 and 1876, around the time that the Lees were developing Park Bridge village. Titus was a textile magnate. The town opened on his 50th birthday. I like it. It sounds a bit like me. I'm going to build this. I'm going to name it after me, and we're opening it on my birthday. That's totally what I would have done. You know, give me all the credit. So, in addition to housing, schools, a hospital, and an institute, there was a park, Victoria Hall with the Wurlitzer cinema organ, a library, concert hall, billiard room, a science lab, and a gym. I'd have ignored that one. You know, everything else, yes, gym, no thank you. Now, I don't mention those in any way to show up Park Bridge. Park Bridge Village is on a much smaller scale, but it's just to show you the kind of company that the Lees were in. They didn't have to do this, okay, but they chose to build and develop this village. And I think it's refreshing. I've given talks about coal mines, about cotton mills, about the dreadful conditions that people in this area were working in, you know, and living in. And I just think it's absolutely wonderful, you know, for the Lees family to have done this. I'm not going to pretend working in Ironworks was the healthiest or the happiest of, you know, occupations, but I think the Lees did do their best, or tried to, by their workers. You know, happy and healthy employees can only have a beneficial impact on their business, but they didn't have to do it. They certainly were not the norm. You know, when I've given my talks on coal mines, cotton mills, there were so many acts that came into law repeatedly just to try and improve things for ordinary people. But these guys didn't need that, they did it anyway. You know, life wouldn't have been easy. You work 12 hours days in hot, very hot, so hot you couldn't even have windows, loud, dirty conditions. But then it's only a short stroll home. So, you know, you weigh it up. I wouldn't have been arguing with it. There was a slight downside though, because if you're living in rented property that's tied into your job in Park Bridge, your rent was taken directly from your wages, which, you know, is a sensible thing to do, but, you know, you obviously, your rent's always going to be paid, you're not in danger of losing your job, your home, but if you lost your job, you lose your home. Something the workers would have been keenly aware of, but I still think the ups definitely outweighed the downs. So, Reminiscences of Park Bridge, it is a website, just Google it, Reminiscences of Park Bridge. It's free to enter, you know, it's not behind a paywall or anything, and it's a website where people share their memories and their families' memories of working there or of living there. And so, you know, I'm name checking it because I'm not trying to pass any of this off as my own. But I do want to share some of the details I found because you could really fall down rabbit holes there. So from my reading, I found the Lees put on an annual summer gala each July with games, cakes, a bonfire and a firework display. They had an annual Christmas party at the Institute. I discovered in the early 1930s it cost 1.5 pence for a return ticket from Oldham to Parkbridge railway station. So I do have a rather morbid interest in disasters. So I had a look, but I couldn't find any, so I'm really sorry, no particular disasters. I mean, there would have been accidents, of course there were. If there were any spectacular ones, the Lees have definitely kept them well covered up. But there were memories of accidents. There was a piece of machinery called a cropper. I'm not going to go into details, don't worry, but this is like a guillotine used for cutting metal. And we'll just leave it there. Quite a few references of the cropping things that perhaps it shouldn't have. You know, not too many safeguards between croppers and delicate human bodies. So we'll move on to where did Parkbridge export to? So local legend absolutely has it that rivets from Parkbridge were used in the construction of the Titanic. Oh, that's not the Titanic, that is. In 1909. The Eiffel Tower in 1887. This is to be constructed with Parkbridge iron rivets. I also discovered that Parkbridge rivets were used in the construction of the Sydney Harbour Bridge in 1932. So the iron made was exported all over the world. And so, I mean, that's facts. These are kind of local tales, but there's no reason to disbelieve them. But we can get our iron as far as Sydney, Australia. We can easily get it to Ireland and to Paris, okay? That said, so there's a band formed in 2022 called Parkbridge, and they released their first album called Rivets for the Eiffel Tower. That is our album. Proof, if we needed it, that the local legends are true. So the band is from Ashton, and according to a band member, at the Eiffel Tower Museum in Paris, there is an inscription that says, rivets made by the Parkbridge Iron Foundry, Ashton under Lyne. So they felt that was the perfect title for their first album. I don't think there's a second album yet. The difficult second album. But, you know, I think that's absolutely brilliant. And if it's on a record cover, it's true. And if it's mentioned in a museum in Paris, I think there's every chance it's factually correct. But, you know, if anybody's going over to Paris in the near future, pop into the museum, please report back. Okay. So I'll run through other local ironworks. So Wheatfield, got a couple of photos there, Wheatfield Ironworks. So this is another one in Bardsley, so at the top of Knott Lane. So this is where the industrial units are at the top of Knott Lanes. And we've got this second view here. So this photo was taken in 1947. I don't have a huge amount of information, unfortunately. But I don't know when it opened or when it closed, but it was owned by Abel Lees and Son. So Abel Lees in 1871 listed as living with his wife and his son Frederick in Bardsley. In fact, they lived 2 doors up from me. And he built the row of 3 houses at the end of Bardsley Vale Avenue. And it was his nephew who lived in the one that we live in. So yes, Abel lived just a couple of doors up from, not me, kind of 100 years ago. So Abel's father, also called Abel, was born in 1804 or 1805, the same year that Samuel Lees II died at the age of 40. And I think Abel Lees Sr. was the nephew of Samuel Lees II. It gets so complicated, it really does. This is why their family tree will be my life's work. But yes, so there's definitely connection from this ironworks to, I mean, it would make sense. So I think this one's father, nephew of the founder of Parkbridge. Yeah, so we've got that connection there. And then on the 1906 Bardsley Ordnance Survey map, we've got reference here to the ironworks on Keb Lane, Middlefield Ironworks, cleverly where Middlefield is now. And I can find nothing, absolutely nothing. If it wasn't for this map, I wouldn't know it existed.
Well, you call Dobbs Shop. They
As a
called it
portion
Dobbs
of it.
Shop.
This ironworks was called Dobbs.
Yeah,
Dobbs,
we
that's a local
call it
name.
Dobbs Shop. Yeah, they made what's called drafting rules for cotton mills.
Do you know roughly how long ago it was in existence?
Eh?
When, do you know when it closed down? Do you know when it closed down, roughly? Of course you did, come on. Dig it out, you've got it.
I'd say what? In 50s.
In the 50s?
Yeah, and then it went to Basel car auctions. They used the same building for Basel car auctions.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Right, I'm going to remember that. So that's information's really helpful. I might be able to find a bit more information about it now.
Yeah.
But as Middlefield Ironworks,
Wasn't there a
absolutely.
Pyrex factory somewhere around there?
What, Pyrex? It's not, that was built as a munitions factory just before the war.
Ah, yeah.
Just over there?
Yeah, it was called Thomas Stories.
Right, okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm only pointing over there because you pointed over there. Oh, they're like, "Oh, over there. Over there. So these are two specifically local ironworks that I wanted to include, but there's another one I wanted to mention that may have been part of the Lees family empire. Yeah, so because I don't know anything about this, but I mean, I think we can assume it may have had something to do with those pesky Lees. They seem to have the monopoly on anything business related in this area. So we've got Soho Ironworks. This was owned by an Asa Lees and was based in, and I know how to pronounce this now, Grinnikers. First time round I said, in Greenacres, and everybody shouted at me, Greenacres, love, oh no, Grinnikers. So Asa Lees owned Soho Ironworks in Grinnikers. There's another Samuel Lees now, Asa's father, but he's not 1, 2, 3 or 4. This is a different Samuel Lees. So this Samuel founded the Soho Ironworks in 1816, and he actually named it after a foundry in Birmingham with the same name. He liked the name, so he called it the same name. So it's not Samuel 1, 2, 3 or 4. Clearly there'll be some kind of connection. But this Samuel Lees had 3 sons, Eli, Job and Asa. And they're not names I commonly come across when I'm researching the local branch of the Lees family, but I have found another local Asa Lees, so there's likely a connection. You just need to find it. So Asa Lees took over that firm at some point, creating Asa Lees and Company Limited, and in 1845 joined with the Samuel Barnes to form Lees and Barnes, and there's an advert of theirs from 1848. Grinnikers Moore, Lees and Barnes, brass and iron founders. There we go, probably related to our Lees. Okay, so I'm going to finish then just with some details about potential future development of Park Bridge. Okay, so in 2021, a proposal was put forward by Oldham Council with Thameside to build a new bridge to run the route of the viaducts. Okay.
This shut down now. Is that the one where?
Yeah, they knocked it down.
Yeah, so they demolished it in 1971, but now they're looking to rebuild it.
No, there is another bridge that shut down. You know, when you go. I can't describe it. So you know, when you get over the wagon road, and you've got the industrial estate on the right, and you go up, and there's that little bungalow on its own.
Oh no, not up there.
No,
This is literally.
far up.
Yeah, this is literally a proposal to where the viaduct originally was,
Right.
to replace
So
it.
it's following the railway track.
Yeah. Yeah, so to run the route of the original viaduct, the bridge would be 130 metres long, 30 metres high, and it would connect Oldham and Thameside across the Medlock Valley as part of the B network. You've probably seen on all the buses now, they're yellow, they've got this B network, and this is to be part of it. And it's to improve travel by foot and bike, and basically, you know, encourage more people to get out there, which is, I think, is an absolutely fantastic idea. So Oldham described it, how council have described it, celebrating the area's industrial heritage, and I think not many people are going to argue with that. So the bridge, basically, because the valley's got steep sides, it's to connect them to make it easier to get, you know, through walking or when you're biking, more mobility, accessibility, you know, opening the area, you know, bringing in more people, basically. So the application was submitted in 2023 and permission was granted a few months, subject to 26 conditions. I'm not going to go through the conditions, but if they're all met, then one specification is that work on the bridge development must begin by 2026. So when I knew I was going to be doing this, I looked to see if there was any updates, and there's nothing. So I emailed the gentleman in charge of this at Oldham Council. Had to email a couple of times asking for an update, but he has replied, basically saying, no update.
Not doing it.
He basically said it's still in planning, there is no update. But, I mean, I'm taking that as positive because I genuinely thought something might come back and say it's not going to happen. It was too ambitious, it's too costly, it's, you know, we're spending all our money ripping up the town centre and rebuilding it, you know. But it is, I got that email I think last week, so still ongoing, no updates, but hopefully, but it does have to begin next year if they're going to meet all the demands basically. One of the conditions, and I really like this, is mitigating a concern that people will fall off the bridge. I mean, to be fair, it is going to be rather high. It's the equivalent of 6 double-decker buses, but I'm pretty confident they'll take that part of the planning and designing quite seriously. But, you know, hopefully Parkbridge Ironworks will be playing another important part in the local area. And that is it. That is my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.